of that disposal. And that's the accountability piece, and that's the most important piece is that it was drawn up and disposed of, and somebody saw you disposed of it, because you know you can draw that up, or you can take that vial out and you can do what you want to do with it. So the accountability in the audit there is that you actually had a witness of that disposal.
Okay, so in this little block that says amount wasted.
10 milligrams on 6/2/10.
Okay, so when you look at that form, does that tell you that whatever the paramedic's name is in the first couple boxes is the person that wasted that?
The wasted, and then the witness would be the other signature.
Okay, so whenever out-of-date drugs are destroyed or wasted pursuant to that policy that we're looking at, that 102.0547, it's documented on this form with the signatures of the paramedic that actually wasted the drug and whoever witnessed the destruction.
By policy, yes.
Okay. And was the policy that we're talking about and this form in effect in June of 2010?
Yes.
All right. I'd like to direct your attention now to the summer of 2010. Understanding you'd only been with Volusia County for a short period of time, but did you become aware of an incident involving Captain Rollins that had occurred with respect to the destruction of lorazepam?
I did.
And there was he, as a logistics officer, was he the EMS manager?
Not at the time, he was not.
And what's the EMS manager? What does that mean?
The EMS manager, and I have to go back and see if I can remember. I don't believe we had a specific person assigned as an EMS manager in June of 2010. We did before that. There were several captain level positions that were assigned to administrative functions in fire services.
What's the EMS manager do?
The EMS manager would coordinate program work, would coordinate the program work in emergency medical services, training, the pharmaceuticals, the controlled substances, and just other program work that goes along with that.
Okay, and the reason that I'm asking this is because the policy that we're looking at talks about the EMS manager or is designee performing this function of replacing the drugs at each of the stations. Was there anything that precluded Captain Rollins from doing that task on that day? I mean, he's allowed to do that if he's designated to do
no,
that.
And I believe he had done that at other times, not just with the lorazepam, but had done this same task at other times. That's what I was told.
Okay. And just so the record's clear, when you're talking about him performing the same task, you're talking about going
exchange of controlled substances.
Okay. To your knowledge, though, had it ever been done the way by Captain Rollins or anyone else, the way that he did it on June 2nd of 2010?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Because I want it to be clear to the board when you talk about wasting the drugs, with throwing a full vial of lorazepam into a container like that Sharps container, would that be considered in compliance with the policy?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Not as a, no. The proper wasting of that medication, any controlled substance, because you want to get that controlled substance sort of off the street, okay? And to do that properly, you have to draw it up and then dispose of the fluid either into the Sharps container or to a sink or whatever else you're doing.
Okay. When you first became aware that of something that had been done by Captain Rollins that appeared to be not within policy, when did you become aware of that? Not the exact date. How long after?
I didn't learn of this until sometime in August of 2010, and actually I heard about it through the grapevine that we had, because the controlled substance piece was sort of on the front burner in the organization. There was another IA case being worked on another paramedic, and so the grapevine made it around to me that we've had an issue with lorazepam, and at every station where this controlled substance was exchanged, there was an improper disposal of this medication. So I went And they named Captain, at the time, Captain Rollins as the individual who was going around doing the exchange. And so I went to his supervisor, which at the time was Deputy Chief, and questioned him about it. And I did not get a straight answer when I asked him about it. In fact, his answers were not truthful, as I later found out. So I opened up an internal affairs investigation to look into this exchange of controlled substance, because I couldn't get a straight answer from the supervisor really of what happened, and because of the seriousness of this, I felt that we needed to do that.
And did you open an internal investigation because of the seriousness of
Absolutely, controlled substance.
Okay. Were you told at some point that Captain Rollins had in fact taken all the lorazepam from all those stations and placed it in a sharps container rather than having it wasted?
Yes.
Okay. Those containers, are they under any kind of lock and key? Do they?
No.
So they.
You can. It's well, it just has a little slide here, and it's used for start an IV. Start an IV. You take the needle and you just put it in here, or a empty medication vial. You put it in here, or whatever else that you want to put that may be contaminated. Or maybe a biohazard. That's generally what it's for, and then you just close it back up.
Okay. And how does the lid come off of there? Do you know?
Well, it's got to be like anything else.
Okay.
And just would pop it off.
So if the lorazepam was properly wasted by squirting it into the ground or whatever, would it be appropriate then to put the empty vials in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. At the conclusion of the internal affairs investigation, did you find out that, or did you learn that Captain Rollins had done what you were initially told? He had not had the drugs properly wasted. He violated the policy. Was that? Did you?
What I learned was that he did in fact go to each one of the stations and did drop off the new lorazepam. He took the old vials, put them in a sharps container, and then directed each of the folks who signed the form to sign the form that it had been wasted properly, meaning that it had been drawn up and squirted out and disposed of.
From the perspective of this accountability form, did you feel that that was improper for Captain Rollins to direct his subordinates to sign those forms?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because the wasting of a controlled substance is as I described. You draw it up and you dispose of the fluid so that the fluid is not available for reuse, and that did not occur.
So if the medical director was trying to sort of track what happened to a certain lot of lorazepam through the process of it coming into the organization and either being used or disposed of, and this form, as they were filled out by those paramedics, what's wrong with that?
If there was any audit, the state audited, State Department of Health audited, if the medical director wanted an audit on that, then you would read this form and you would think that it was properly disposed of, meaning that the fluid was drawn up and disposed of in the sharps container or sink.
What was your understanding at the conclusion of the investigation as to what Captain Rollins did with the box full of full lorazepam vials?
We at Station 42 on Kepler Road, there's a room where sharps containers are dropped off for pickup by a local vendor, was my understanding, and that the lorazepam vials were in a container such as this, taped up and put in there for the local vendor to pick up. I later learned that that somehow this tracked up to Chief Pasica, I believe, and then a day or two later he directed Captain Rollins to go back out and dispose of it properly, which he did with, I believe, Lieutenant Huber, who was the witness, or one did it and the other witnessed it, however, that went down. So it was properly accounted for after the fact.
2 days later?
2 days later.
Okay.
But we still had forms that said that at every fire station it was done properly. And I think what was egregious as well was there were firefighters and other perhaps officers directed by a senior officer in the agency to sign a form that I believe put those people in a bad situation.
When you talk about the vendor picking up these sharps containers, would that be that under normal circumstances, a sharps container full of either syringes or empty vials?
Syringes, empty vials, etc.
So had the vendor come and taken that box of lorazepam between June 2nd and June 4th, then somebody would have had a box full of...
Lorazepam, absolutely.
Okay. Did you learn also through the investigation of the paramedics that were asked to sign these forms?
Well, I'll go back also. Anybody could have walked in that back room and picked up that tape box and had a box full of lorazepam as well, which concerned me.
The back room there was not locked?
I won't say whether it was locked or it wasn't locked.
But people had access to it?
Absolutely, have access to it, and so we would have had a box of that somewhere.
You mentioned something, and I can't remember exactly how you said it, but did you hear scuttlebutt or through the investigation that the paramedics that were directed to sign this form, that they had an issue with that?
Yes, yes.
And did you hear that some of them were uncomfortable having to do that?
They were very uncomfortable, but they felt as though